Okay, we got it. Good evening, everyone. So again, thank you for your flexibility in changing as we discussed last week due to travel. I'll be flying out about the time that this class actually was normally scheduled to start tomorrow to head to that conference. So I appreciate it and you guys being flexible. So we're going to kind of review quickly a little bit about some norm to reference on our assignment. I will go back. I'm going to show just a few slides on a PowerPoint pertaining to CBM, and I actually already had went over it previously, but we're going to revisit it quickly. It was done back in week 3, and I'll pull up some of those slides just to clarify some things pertaining to the CBMs. But I just kind of want to go back and revisit norm reference. I know some of you guys have really already gotten well into the assignment. Some of you guys may be just getting ready to start just due to some circumstances with test availability for norm reference. So we can work through that. Really, before I begin and jump into it, does anyone have any specific questions? I know Amanda had one just really before we started, and I think Angela did as well. Does anyone have any questions, any specifics? Before we jump into it, knows everyone pretty much have what you're going to do down and progressing? Okay. So want to talk briefly, kind of just move ahead and touch base on the CBM, and then I'll go and review kind of the rubric, what we're looking at, and review some of the slides. So the CBM will be coming up, and this is, as I mentioned before we start recording, this is the part or the point in time in this course when we start to see the overlap. So basically, like I mentioned, you're right in the middle of doing this assignment, and then you're actually I'm going to encourage you tonight to go ahead and get started on the CBM so you can get all your data points, and you won't have to just pile that all into a few days. You can spread it out over the next few weeks. So looking ahead at that assignment, that is actually going to be due on May the, wrote it down on my dates here, make sure I'm telling you right. It is actually going to be due the CBM on May the 7th. Okay. So you're looking at 2 weeks from this upcoming Sunday. So you're almost looking at 3 full weeks ahead, because the norm reference will be due this Sunday, April the 23rd. So I would encourage you to look at CBMs, try to get an idea on what specific probe that you would want to do, and also perhaps an idea on what type of intervention you would want to do. So the objective of the assignment is to kind of look at your informal assessment, and then also look at some of the data that you're collecting from the normed reference. And you should already kind of see some definite weak areas. And so you can kind of decide on that specific weak skill that you've identified. And I would encourage you to focus on that during the CBM and find a probe related to that specific skill or that weakness that you've identified. And the objective is, or the goal is, to administer this probe multiple times over the next almost 3 weeks. And the goal is, if possible, would like for you to obtain 6 data points. Okay, so that's literally, you would administer this probe 6 different times. I know that that's quite a few in that short amount of time. If you're a little under that, that's fine. But really, if you can, would encourage you to try to obtain the 6 in a normal semester. Before we switched to the 8-week, we used to try to get more, even more than 6. Of course, they had a lot more time. So the first one is when you administer it, you're going to kind of get their base score, what we call the base score, just to kind of see where that student is. And it's much like an informal. It's kind of a glorified informal assessment. So you're going to give the student the probe, which will assess them, and then you will score it. And that kind of tells you where he or she is. Then you're going to kind of focus on that weak area. And then you would come back and give another probe, the same exact probe, and see if the student's skill set has improved. So let's say you decide to give it on this Thursday, just throwing that out there. So if you gave it on Thursday, you got the baseline score, give a few days of instruction to kind of focus on that skill set, and then come back perhaps maybe on the following Monday or Tuesday and give the second probe again to see if there's any improvement. And so we're going to do this over multiple times. Hopefully our goal is to achieve 6. And we hope when we go and chart this that we see an upward progression on our chart. We're going to chart the growth using those data points, and we want to see some upward movement on that. We don't really want to see downward. If we see downward movement, we're going backward. That's a concern. Could be that perhaps the probe may be too difficult for the student. Okay, that's one thing that could tell us. So when we chart these, we want to find what our baseline score is, and then we'll go and graph the additional data points. And we want to determine what our aim line goal is, or what our aim is. So once you get the base in your mind, you're going to say, hey, I would eventually like to see the student achieve a certain score. And over the next 4 to 5 probe administrations, that's going to be our aim or our goal. And then we're going to graph that. And so that will show some definite, hopefully, growth versus going backward, as I mentioned before. So sounds complex, but yet really it's pretty simple, because you're going to use that same probe multiple times. You're not going to change the probe every single time. Okay. Now that particular probe, you can mix the questions up in the order you give them, but you can use the same set of questions. Okay, or problems if it's math. Is anybody, just based on the skills that you have noticed some weaknesses or struggles on the informal and normed reference up to this point, does anybody have an idea on a particular skill that you might want to focus on?
Okay, so I was thinking about maybe a spelling test.
Okay.
And so the question is, do I like give him the same words every time?
You would mix up the order.
Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
You certainly would. Don't give them the same order.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Angela?
What if it's a like a fast bridge, like reading, like to score like how many words?
Fluency?
Pardon? Yeah, on fluency, yes.
Yeah.
Do I give him the same passage, or do I give him just a string of first grade passages?
I would give them a string of first grade passages that are pretty equivalent to each other on that.
Okay.
If you can, Angela, try to get the passages where it has pretty much the same amount of words in that given passage. That's pretty equivalent as far as level of difficulty.
Okay.
So by that, just make sure, like if it's first grade or second grade, let's just say second grade, your baseline, and then you're going to come back and give them another probe. Make sure it's pretty equivalent as far as grade level. Don't throw a third or fourth grade passage at them. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that kind of gives you an idea on spelling, the idea we heard there, and then also on fluencies. Anyone else have any ideas on what skill set you might want to focus on?
I have a question. So if I did
I have a question.
math, sorry.
Got an additional student, right?
Do like if I did math, would it be the same problems or just similar problems? Like Maximus?
Do what, math?
Math. Like would it be the same problems or similar problems? Like if I were doing integer operations.
Okay, what I would do is I would use the same set of problems on math, but change them up in the order. Okay, on the map.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, I know. I was going to ask, how long should it take?
I have
CBM.
A CBM. So you want to go in, and I would say no more than 3 to 5 minutes. Again, these are very similar to informals. Very similar, but you're focusing in on specific skill set, and you're giving the probe multiple times in hopes that there's growth. Okay. Same way, Angela, short passages, reading, what's your grade level on your student?
First grade.
Okay. So you're like I said, 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to go in there and track the rate. Are you going to have them read it out aloud to you, and you're tracking?
Have them read out loud for 1 minute.
Yeah, for a minute, which is sufficient for first grade, and you're going through there and tracking, and maybe you're circling the words or putting a hash mark to them on the incorrects, and you're counting it and getting a raw score. That's your first data point. That's your baseline. And you'll wait 3-4 days, 2 or 3, depending on when you give it, and you have a weekend gap in there. You come back in and you'll do similar passage. Same thing, another minute, you're gonna go through and track their rate, fluency rate. Okay.
When we're doing the data recording for that, so like I have a curriculum-based assessment progress monitoring data recording sheet for math. When I am doing that data sheet, that is one of our tables, or that's our data that we put in our thing. Does that need to be, would it matter if it was handwritten, or do you prefer that data table to be typed up?
As far as a table you're going to put in your report, or
I'll put it in my report. It would just be like, well, it would just be a table for like the date, errors, and then the.
so yeah, so what I would prefer on that is you can go in and create, so take your raw data that you have, your mini notes, whatever it may be, and create a basic table. You can use Word, PowerPoint, and all that to present your data in that, versus taking a picture of a handwritten note and uploading that. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, so take that raw data and put it into a graph of some sort.
Yeah, some sort. You can create it using Word, PowerPoint, or any other software tool of your choice, Excel, something you're familiar with. Okay. Any other questions? Get off that. I'm going to switch over really quick. I want to just share briefly with you, if I can. I'm gonna pop my screen. Bear with me here just a minute. I'll share it. Oh. Okay, can everyone see my screen quickly? And these slides may look familiar. I covered them back in week 3, but I just kind of wanted to revisit them, refresh your memory. So curriculum-based measurement, basically it monitors student progress frequently by comparing their progress over a period of time and the rate at how they progress. And so we definitely are hoping to see growth here. That is the overall goal here. So you are going back and you're reviewing information from other assessments if you administered up to this point. Okay, you're focusing in on a skill deficiency, and then you're going to choose a probe that targets that. And we're going to administer that multiple times in hopes that you are seeing continuous improvement. That's what we're striving for. Okay. And you can do this. Again, this is just kind of a condensed, simplified version of doing this. You can do these throughout the year multiple times on students over a longer period of time versus just like a little condensed 3-week window that we're doing now. And it'll give you some pretty informative data just to kind of to add to the other information that you're already collecting on that student. So CBMs, what do we consider to be effective on that? So CBM that will measure sufficient reliability and validity so that they can be used confidently by you as a classroom teacher or a resource teacher. So you're collecting that information to put it in your pile of data you're collecting to when you get down to make considerations on whether the student needs to be formally tested for placement. Okay. The different measures are easy to use and understand so that teachers, anybody really, can employ them and easily teach them and show them to another individual, such as a parent in your room, and they could assist you in administering those as well, collecting that data for you, which would enable you to concentrate on some other things. Also, the results that you obtain They're easy to explain to others, meaning parents or maybe a cooperating teacher in a regular classroom. You can collaborate with them and easily show and explain the results, and even the parents and building level administrator as you communicate concerns to them. The measures are frequently used throughout the school year. Basically, we're looking for inexpensive because you can use these frequently. As I mentioned, you can collect data ongoing over a 2 or 3 month window. So there are resources out there. I mentioned last week, one that's a lot of our students have used before is going to easycbm.com. There's a lot of information there as far as probes to use, CBMs to employ. So we want it to be inexpensive. As compared to normed reference tests that are out there. And as you guys have communicated with qualified professionals in your district, I'm sure they have probably shared with you the cost of some of those. They are very expensive, just like I mentioned the WJ4. Just purchasing that kit alone, you're looking at several thousand, 4,000 plus, and then the protocols that we use to score, those become expensive over time as well. So we're looking for something that's inexpensive, but also gives us good, reliable data. Okay, here are just some examples. Fluency. Okay, I think Angela, you were looking at some fluency probes, right? So it talks right here as an example. Fluency probes, grade level reading passages. Okay, maybe instructional level for special education. So the student you're working with may be already suspecting some things or is already being served in some areas and you just want to do some assessments on them. Okay. Students read a passage orally for 1 minute. Teacher records areas, exactly what we just talked about before I pop this up, right? Okay. The metrics that you're looking at, number of words read correctly per minute. Okay. The accuracy rate. And then you looking at perhaps some type of a rubric on that. But definitely we're just the first 2 bullet points, that's what we're after right there, right? We're looking at mistakes, number of words correctly, and just the accuracy rate. Comprehension, for anybody looking at comprehension, students are given a passage that contains missing words. Students select correct word when given 3 choices. Okay, so they're going down through there and reading, there's missing words, and they have option of 3 to plug in there and to in order for that story to be complete and make sense. So that's just a couple examples there looking at reading. Okay, here is a chart. This is one done for reading, and it's done through 6th grade because a lot of times, really after 6th grade, I don't know what your district is like, but a lot of times after 6th grade, you don't really see a designated reading class. Your school may be the exception where they do. A lot of times once they get to middle school, they kind of shifted away from that where it's just strictly a reading class. So that's why you see on this recommended growth, it shows grades 1 through 6 on there. And so it shows a realistic growth rate, what it is for special education and general education. So this, Angela, this may be something you want to refer to. This is in week, let's see, I believe it's in week 6 or 3. Week 3 in the learning module, but it'll say chapter 6 PowerPoint. So this will be a slide that you might want to reference when you're looking at proper growth rates for reading. Okay. Determining progress, looking at fluency. So again, we want to get the baseline here, the term baseline, aim line. The baseline is your very beginning score off the first probe. So Angela, if that student's going in and you're doing a 1 minute fluency and there's a total of, I'm just going to say 40 words on that. Okay, I'm just throwing a number out. And little Johnny or little Susie goes in and they miss 15. So, you know, your baseline out of those 40 words, it's going to be 25, right? Okay, you got 25 words correct on that. So it kind of gives you your baseline where to start. And then we hope the next 5 probes that you give or the next 4 that you see improvement and a continuous climb on their improvement in their proficiency. Okay. Also, you're going to kind of plot an aim line on that when we go in and chart it. So basically using a table to determine what a reasonable increase per week would be. Again, Angela, this gives you kind of the realistic growth rate. Okay, so when you kind of want to plot or anticipate what that aim line would be, let's say you're going to give it over 6 probes over 3 weeks. This will kind of give you an idea to kind of plot their growth and come up with an aim line on that, where you think they should be at the end, what their goal is. Okay. Then it gives one also here, 2nd grade, baseline was 55 words, correct. Okay, on a reading fluency. Weekly increase, you hope, for that 2nd grade student. Going back here, you can see realistic growth, Angela, is 1.5. So I'm kind of floating back and forth here. Weekly increase is 1.5. Here, they're doing it ongoing through the majority of the school year. You can see 25 weeks of school left, right? So they're going to multiply the number of weeks left in the school year times what the projected growth rate is, weekly increase of 1.5. And so hoping to increase it by 38, right? So you had your goal of 38 plus their baseline of 55. And so at the end of those 25 weeks, you hope to see a 93. Okay, that's kind of a good little example for you to refer to, especially you, Angela. I keep saying your name, but want to do the fluency right there's a pretty simple little formula on that. Okay, kind of give you some ideas. All right. Scroll ahead here. Plot data 1 or 2 times a week. Okay, and that's kind of what asking you to do now. We're doing kind of this in a condensed version. We're not doing it for 23 weeks or 25, but asking you to plot the data 1 or 2 times a week to get the 6 points. If the student falls below the aim line on 3 to 4 consecutive measures, you want to adjust your instruction. Okay. So since this is a condensed version of doing CBMs, and we're not doing it over a lengthy period of time, like the example that when they calculated the student, Angela, since you're doing fluency, I would say if they fall below that aim line, 2 to 3, knowing that you're going to give 6, probably need to make a little bit of an adjustment on that. Could be a level of difficulty could be a little bit too much for them. Okay. The trend line. So when we graph these, the trend line basically is showing their average performance. Okay. So it's gonna plot it, connect them, and again, hopefully we see that upward trend. Okay. Different method here is you're going to divide your data points into thirds, find the median for the 1st and 3rd groups, and plot and connect those points on the graph. That's another method that you can to come up with your trend line. You hear me talking about aim line and trend line. There's also examples of those in that the example of the CBM report. So each of those, there's an example in the learning modules and the 805 resources. It'll kind of show you the trend lines on that, kind of give you an example. And next week when we meet, I will pop that specific report up, because sometimes that particular graph is confusing. So I will pop one up from a report, and we'll kind of walk through it, make sure everyone understands it. Okay. Here's one on comprehension. I don't know, is anybody doing comprehension on their probe? It's on here tonight. Anybody looking at it? No? Okay. So if anyone ends up pulling, the recording up, there is some information on the CBM slides pertaining to comprehension. Here's one on spelling. I think, Alice, you were looking at spelling, right? So this one's kind of geared for you on here, determining progress in spelling. So construct measures from grade or instructional level words. Okay. You can do this based on grade level, and you can come up with the words that you want to use. Okay. So shows 12 words for grades 1 through 3 is a suggested amount. How old's your student, Alice?
He's about a kindergarten level.
Okay,
Kindergarten to first grade.
so since it's K1, you might want to drop that down to 8 to 10.
Okay.
Sort of amount, since 1 through 3, they're recommending 12. So you can shorten that. We're just kind of make some adjustments here. And because if you were to go the 12, upward to 12 might be a little bit overwhelming for kindergarten, first grade. So I would say 8, no more than 10.
He's a 7th grader, but he reads.
Okay, I got you. So
he reads at a first grade level.
I would go ahead, since due to the age, I would go ahead and use the 12 then. I'm sorry.
12, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, I should have said that.
So. Okay, so you're looking at scoring correct letter sequences. So you would have deduct a point for each 2 letters that are incorrect sequence. Give 1 point for a correct beginning and ending letter. So it's a little bit different way of scoring. So for example, looking at the word time. Okay, you look at T, T-I, I-M, M-E, and E. So there are 5 correct sequences. And then you would plot the number accordingly. Okay. Kind of question on that. So that's a good reference for you. Once you get to doing it, you're like, where's that slide at? Right there's an example on how to do it. Okay.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Here is, again, very similar to what I pointed out to Angela. This is on Spellic on a spelling. So realistic growth rates. And again, it kind of focuses on grades 2 through 6. So it gives you a realistic growth rate based on those grade levels. So it'll give you an idea on that. So 2nd grade, realistic growth rate of 1. And if they're really ambitious, 1.5. So it kind of has 2 categories. And then again, shows you here how to go in and calculate that.
Is that words or is that percents?
Percents.
Okay.
The next one's math. Anyone doing math? Yep. So talking about constructing measures from grade or instructional level in math may be composed. It gives an example of 25 problems. Students are given 2 minutes to complete the problems. When I see that, it makes me think of Mad Minute. Anybody use the Mad Minutes? Okay. So a lot of times we're checking for fluency in math, working the problems out under a time scenario. So let's say, for example, you give them 25 problems, you give them 2 minutes to complete those. And so you score digits that are correct per minute. You have 1 point for each digit that's correct in the answer. For example, if you had 54 plus 21, answer 75, they have 2 digits correct. Okay. And then you plot the number of digits correct per minute.
Do you give it a negative sign a digit?
Do what now?
So like, would you do a negative sign and use that as a digit?
You can. Yeah, you can do that. Okay. Okay, here is kind of the realistic growth rates in reading. So I kind of will give you an idea there, Amanda, for grade levels 1 through 6. How old's your student?
Freshman in high school.
Okay, what's their approximate grade? I mean, are they below grade level math, obviously?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of give you an idea. Excuse me?
Yeah, about 6th grade.
Okay, so you kind of use this grade 6 as your base there, kind of guide you. Okay, so again, this will be a good reference for you if you need something to as an example when you get ready to score. And again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do we oh, never mind. I don't remember what I was gonna ask.
Okay, well, if you think of it later, you can ask me. Again, I will review this quickly next week just to as a refresher. I just kind of want to give you some examples and show you as you kind of get ready and go ahead and maybe start getting a probe ready. Okay. So a little bit on CBM research, and this will be probably the last slide I'll show you pertaining to that for tonight is it's a great way to chart progress and determine whether they're making adequate gains, okay? And the results as you're doing these, as you go along, especially if you do them over a period of time, it's a great indicator whether you as a resource teacher or collaborating with a regular teacher needs to go in and modify some instruction planning on the work that they're doing, okay? It will be a clear indicator because you're collecting multiple data points over a long period of time, and it will show you. I mean, it'll be very evident, like, hey, we need to go in, make some adjustments here because we've either got to a point where the student might be stagnant and they're not showing any growth, or they've leveled out, or they maybe have dropped a little bit. So it could be that material is starting a little bit too difficult for them, or the concept. We need to make that adjustment. It also is a good way for you to collaborate with regular teacher and setting higher goals, maybe to challenge and push that student so it can grow and thrive. Students receive more feedback, and you get more feedback by looking at the data. Okay, enables you to modify instructional techniques more often. So it's a great way to modify and be very flexible in your instruction because you're seeing whether they're making adequate gains or getting frequent feedback. It's a great way for you as an instructor to be able to tell if you need to make changes. Also, over a period of time, in addition to other data you've collected, it will give you more information on determining whether they are going to be eligible for some formalized testing to see if they will qualify for special services. Okay. A lot of times, we've seen that teachers and students both like CBMs better because they're short, somewhat informal assessments. They are a little bit more formalized than maybe what you did week 1 and 2 when we did the informal assessments, but yet they're not so formalized. It's like a normed reference. Okay. Still provides a little bit of a relaxed feeling for the student to maybe where they're not quite as anxious. And I think, especially if you're doing the timed, I've found that students really enjoy sometimes doing like the mad minutes. I mentioned that a while ago. I think Amanda's doing math, the mad minutes, and they like to see that, hey, I beat my last score. You know, they look forward to that. So it challenges them a little bit. When we look at bilinguals, it's valid. It could be valid for showing progress for them. Perhaps it may not allow for specific measurement in some very important constructs. So there could be some limitations there. And also materials used in class could be influential on CBM scores. Okay, depending on what you've been doing up to that point. So you just have to kind of remember that. That could be a factor in it as well. I'm going to switch screens quickly and kind of go over with you as well what all as you start kind of thinking about CBM and looking ahead. Bear with me just a minute.
That was going to be my question about instruction after the CBM.
Yes.
So the interventions that we do, so after we get our baseline, we determine like an intervention, or do we determine the intervention after all 6 of those are done?
You can determine it as you are going.
Okay.
What intervention, and especially if you get your baseline, you might implement that intervention between one probe and another probe to see how much of a difference it's going to make. Is it going to make a significant increase in that student's achievement, or is it stagnant? That'll tell you that intervention maybe was not as appropriate as I thought. I need to go back to the drawing board again.
So we can have multiple interventions within time. Okay.
You could. And just for example, going back, if we were doing this and it was stretched out over multiple weeks, it really would give you a lot of different opportunities to employ some different interventions, because let's say the first one doesn't work. You don't want to keep doing it, obviously, right? Students not going to grow. So we as instructors, teachers, we have to adjust what we're doing and try another tool to help facilitate their growth. So that's what I'm saying. it is definitely appropriate to employ those different interventions along the way, because you don't want to keep doing the same thing when it's not effective. Okay. Okay, bear with me. I'm gonna share my screen, switch over here quickly.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you say that the CBM, so like our SPED team, we do progress monitoring every week,
Yeah.
and then we record it,
Mhm.
keep track of if our students are making progress. If not, we adjust our intervention.
Very-
So
very
it's
similar.
CBM actually progress monitoring.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
CBM is very in a nutshell, it's very similar. I mean, to progress monitoring, and yeah, I mean, very similar. I mean, the same concept. We're just doing it in a shortened period of time, kind of give you the feel of it. A lot of districts already probably have procedures in place where they do ongoing monitoring like that, and that's great. So yeah, this is pretty much the same thing. So you may already have quite a bit of data and data points.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You have an advantage already. How about that? Okay, this is really, and I will go over this again next week. I just kind of want to generally give you some ideas here. Okay, looking ahead. The breakdown on the CBM. Okay, you've heard me mention baseline. Again, that's your first score once you administer your probe to just kind of see where the student is. The aim line, you can use the basic formula, projecting their growth based on the baseline score. Okay, and you can reference back to the slides that I mentioned previously that kind of shows you a basic simple formula. We're looking at literally, at least says here 3 weeks. Literally from now until the time it's due, it's almost 3 weeks. I mean, we're just shy of 3 weeks if you think about it. It would have been 3 weeks from this last Sunday. Okay. To try to get 6 data points in there. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for. But really what I want to show you is the points. This assignment is weighted the heaviest out of any of them in the whole course. Okay, this is worth 225 points, this assignment. So that's why I wanted to kind of show you the rubric, what we're looking for. Make sure you truly understand. Literally, there will be an additional section in your report compared to the first 2 you have done, and it's because of the probes, the interventions. It's going to ask you to discuss that a little bit. So again, identifying information is pretty much the same. It's not any different what we've been doing. Okay, you're naming the test, the probe, test, the dates, purpose, the why, a little bit about the student, their background, teacher observation, a little bit about the family. Here's the new section, probe and intervention. You haven't had this section on the first 2, right? On the informal, you did not, and on the norm reference, you won't see a section specific to this. Okay, so you're going to name and describe the probe that you're using. Okay, and you're using it multiple times. Discuss the rationale for it. Okay, really, what's the rationale behind using the probe? Just give a description of it. Describe the quantity and frequency of probe use. Our goal here is to utilize it six times to get 6 data points. Okay, you might fall just shy of that. That's fine, but our goal is 6. Name and describe the intervention used. Okay, this is where you're talking about. You might have more than one. Just mention that, right? You implemented one, you say, hey, it didn't get any growth, it didn't make a difference, I had to go back to the drawing board. So you could literally have more than one intervention. Discuss the rationale for it, especially if you had to make changes and utilize more than one intervention. And then if you had to modify that intervention, okay, just give an explanation of, any modification. If you did not have to make any, don't worry about it. Just simply make a statement. No modifications were applied to the selected intervention. Okay. Test results, interpretation. You've had this all along. This particular assignment, the point value for different line items in this section a little bit different, okay? Make sure, guys, that you are putting that information in some type of a visual representation, table, chart, graph, okay? You'll see that alone is 28 points. One of the visuals that you're doing needs to have a line graph that will show or have your baseline identified, the intervention, and the aim line. I will show you an example of that next week on Wednesday. We'll get more into that. I'll pop up example and show you what that actually looks like, okay? Then you will talk a little bit about and analyze the results, referring to all the tables and graphs, and explaining that student's performance over basically these almost 3 weeks, 2.5, really, that you're going to be working on it. And then any conclusion you come up with, just make sure you support it from data that you collected from the CBM. And then here's a repeat of what we've done before. We're identifying some specific strengths, and we're going to identify some specific weaknesses based on the CBMs. Okay. Again, I want to make sure this particular item right here is one that is an addition, making sure you have that graph in there that shows the baseline and aim line. Okay. All right, then we're going to get down to recommendations and conclusions. Very similar to what we've done on the first two. You're going to explicitly highlight some instructional planning recommendations based on the student's performance from the probes that you administer. Also, you may explain any instructional methods that would be used, and any modifications or grade level changes to materials that needed to be done for that student, and just kind of give a brief summary of their overall performance. Then a reflection. This is something new. This is an additional section that you have not had your first two reports. It's just a basic reflection. Looking back over this assignment, you would explain 3 things that was learned about CBMs that you administered. Okay. You would also discuss if you would use the CBM again and why. Okay. Or explain why you would not use it again with at least 2 pieces of data or information to support. So basically, would you use it again? Why? If not, explain why. Either way. Okay. And then outline at least what you feel like individually, Aaron or Alice or Amanda, whichever one of you are writing this, outline what you think or what you feel like are 2 strengths and at least 2 weaknesses of using CBMs. What do you feel like would be 2 strengths of using them in your classroom and 2 weaknesses? Okay. Then the last thing we're looking at, not necessarily your content, but how it's presented. Are the ideas presented in a relative coherent manner? Proper use of APA, spelling, and then attached permission form. Okay. So the new section for this assignment is a reflection. Okay. Just things you learned about using the CBM. Again, why would you use it or not, and explain why. And then 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses of CBM. Okay. And then also, the additional section in this report is the probe and intervention section. Okay. If you pretty much follow this rubric right down the line and you're addressing those points, you'll be fine. Again, I still am finding some, not necessarily the ones on here tonight, but some that they're just going in there and writing them, and they're not really paying attention to this, and it's catching up. So guys, if you follow that, it's right there in the syllabus. Plus we go over it each week when we're getting ready for the newest assignments and the reports. If you follow that, you're going to be fine. Okay, you'll do just fine on the assignment. But please follow this one because of the 2 new sections on that. Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Under the conclusion, it says support with 2 pieces of data. Would that be like student improved by blank percentage points, or what kind
Yeah,
of
based
data?
on, things you're taking from the data that you've collected. Okay.
Okay,
So you're making, as you conclude, you're making kind of a statement, your concluding statement, Aaron, based on everything that you've collected, and you're projecting that conclusion that based on, as you said, that's exactly what we're looking for.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Again, looking ahead next week when we meet, I will revisit that, review it quickly. And I will also maybe pop up those slides again on CBM just to make sure everyone's good and clear. They're pretty self-explanatory. So now, one thing I want to revisit quickly, and I'm gonna say this on the recording, say to you guys, I've said it last week, I'm still getting emails. I just want to clarify, as you guys are doing normed reference, that my expectations of you as an instructor, and also Fort Hayes, we do not or expect you to go out and get your hands on a norm reference assessment that requires additional qualifications. We're not asking you to do that. Okay. So I just want to clarify that. I still get emails and all that. That is not our expectations at all. There are some normed reference assessments that are out there that your district might do, and it could all be done through software, and most people may not think of them as norm reference, but they qualify. STAR reading, STAR math. I don't know if any of your districts use Renaissance Suite accelerated reader. That's all built into the Renaissance Suite, so you might check. That's all computer based. A lot of times they administer them in a computer lab. They take classes in there in groups. They do STAR reading for benchmarking purposes. Okay. You can pull that data and use it. Okay. You don't have to have special additional qualifications to do that. MAP tests are additional assessments that some districts use for benchmarking purposes. They usually administer those 3 times a year, at the beginning of the year in the first month, somewhere around right before or directly after Christmas break. And then oftentimes they'll come in and do it after spring break, oftentimes in April, for benchmarking purposes and progress monitoring. Those are norm reference exams. Okay. If you're having trouble locating a norm reference, or due to the circumstances in your district to where maybe you contract with a qualified examiner, whether it's a school psychologist or psychometrist, and it's not going to work out, the alternative to help you out is that testing lab video that I provided if needed. That it's perfectly fine to use that. It basically shows me administering the cognitive for the WJ4. The only thing, and I'll remind you, if you decide that's what you need to do, just shoot me an email and let me know, hey, Dr. Posey, I needed to use that video. Can you send me the comprehensive report that's got all the data? And I kind of popped up an example of what that looks like last week. If you guys remember, I shared that with you to show you what they look like. It had all that. The first half was the narrative part. The second half was all the statistical information, the data that went with it. So if that's the case, send me an email and I'll send it to you. And I'll even meet with you one-on-one if I have to on Zoom to kind of go over that. Okay. But again, don't expect you, and I'm not asking you guys to go out and administer some of those without the proper qualifications. I just want to make sure everyone understands that. So is there any questions as we kind of wrap up this evening?
Okay, I may be looking too far ahead, but for the portfolio, we're supposed to do lesson plans, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and they, like they, how should I say this? So for the NRT, I did math. So I would do a lesson plan about math.
Yeah.
And then what I did in the informal assessments, like the phonological awareness, I'd write a lesson plan about that.
That's correct.
And then the last one was spelling. Okay.
That's exactly right. And thank you for bringing that up. You're not really looking too far ahead. It's actually in my notes here and I almost overlooked it. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Here's something too, and I'm going to throw out there. It's a suggestion, recommendation to you. I mentioned this early on that first night, but I know I threw a lot of information at you in a short amount of time. I would strongly encourage you, if you have some time, to maybe go back, pull that template, and go ahead and do that lesson plan for the informal and also for the norm reference. And here's why I say this. I mentioned earlier tonight that we're at a point in the class where things are going to overlap. Okay. The CBM's starting to kick in and some of you are right in the middle of writing that norm reference report or finishing up getting your information, right? Looking ahead, you'll submit the norm reference, and then 2 weeks later, you will submit the CBM on Sunday, May the 7th. That portfolio is due that Friday. Okay, remember, it's the only time an assignment's due that does not fall on a Sunday. And I mentioned this the first night. So there's a short turnaround time from when you submit the CBM, and then you're going to turn right around and that portfolio is due that Friday on or before 4 o'clock. Okay, if you remember, I mentioned that because it takes me quite a bit longer to go through because I have to review all the videos, the mock IEP videos. So if you've got those lesson plans done or been doing them as you go, it's one less thing you got to worry about. And really all you got to do is focus on the mock IEP. You already have the lesson plans done. So something to think about in amongst all your free spare time, right?
So when we're planning our intervention, say for our CBM, like that's our lesson plan, right? Whatever intervention we do.
Yeah, pretty much. You're going to take that intervention and incorporate it into that lesson plan. That's correct. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff, really, if you think ahead, and you're going to take everything you've done through these assignments, and it's all going to roll in and be a part of that mock IEP video, because literally you're just presenting the data that you've collected to a pretend set of parents and a team sitting there to determine whether need to move forward for formalized testing to see if they're going to qualify for services. So you've already been collecting all this information. You're just letting you practice on how to present it as if you were in an actual meeting, presenting it to parents. Okay. So it'll all come together. You may not see that right now, but you will once you sit down and start doing it. And then when you look at the rubric and kind of what we're looking for, it all just fall into place. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Oh, I swear one more. So
Okay.
my data, so my lesson plans, I guess, for probably a lot of my data points it's probably going to be similar. I don't know, because I'm doing math straight across the board.
That's okay. There'll be some overlap if you're sticking with the same subject area and perhaps same focus on skill set. There will be some overlap.
Yeah, and if that student's deficient in that area on all three.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
Yep, that's correct. No, you're fine. Okay. Any other questions? Again, we will revisit CBM next week, talk a little bit more about it because you will already turned in the norm test, and we'll kind of go back through some things and make sure everyone understands. Remember, I will pop up an example of a report that's been done to show you what that chart or that graph looks like with the data points on there that shows the baseline and the aim line. So as an example to help you understand that, so you'll feel comfortable with that. Okay.
I have one quick question to clarify
Okay.
for the norm reference assessment. I remember last week you said that we could observe and use the data and the report that the school psychologist?
You can, if your school psych, if you have that relationship with them and they're comfortable allowing you to observe, which is a great learning opportunity. Yes, you can do that. And then if they will agree to share that data, if the student's parents aware of that and you're doing it for this class purpose, yeah, that's acceptable. The reason I stated what I did earlier was just to kind of clarify, because some took it is I want them to go out there and obtain that test, the WJ4, from their school psych, and then go and administer that to a student. And you can't do that. You got to have the qualifications. But if you come in that room and you're sitting there observing the process, you're not administering, the qualified person is, and they're allowing you to observe it, and then they will sit down with you after they score it and provide you that data. Yeah, you can do it like that. Absolutely.
Okay,
That's a
thank
great
you.
learning opportunity for you to see how that's done. Because a lot of times, individuals don't get to see that. All you know as a SPED teacher is the person, the psychometrist or the school psychologist has an appointment to test a student you've been working with to be evaluated, and you don't know how they're doing it. The only thing you see is when they come into the MEGS meeting and they have that comprehensive report and they start going through it, and everybody's just kind of sitting there looking at them like, what'd you just say? I mean, literally. And so that's why I always say, from that side, the school psych or the psychometrist, it's always good to include visual representation with it, because there's a lot of information thrown at those parents. And you got to see a little bit of it last week when I popped that report up. It can be intimidating at first when it's 15 to 20 pages long. So yeah, definitely. It's a great learning experience if your person will allow you to do it. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Hey, if nothing else, you guys have a great evening. I appreciate again your flexibility and shifting over to the night instead of tomorrow night to correlate with my travel. If you have any questions, as always, you can email or check them early. And then also again, and I will have access to email while I'm out there at that conference, and we'll be checking those on my normal time frame. And then we will be back on a regular schedule next week. We will go back over to Wednesday night, our regular time, and then I'll touch base again on CBMs. Make sure everyone's good with it, okay? All right. Thank you guys. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.